Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. As you are maybe listening to this on Thursday, we are a week away from the kickoff of a brand new season as Purdue takes on Penn State under the lights at Ross-Ade Stadium. We've been previewing the season for over a month now here on Boilers and Beyond with camp questions, with a schedule preview, previewing both sides of the ball, looking back at Jeff Brohm's first 5 years. All of that is in the podcast feed if you missed it. Today, it's finally time to make some predictions for the upcoming season. I have 10 bold predictions to make for you here today that at the end of the season, we'll look back on and see how I did. Then I'll give my official record prediction for Purdue's 2022 season. I'll make a prediction for where they finish in the Big Ten West and just how the West unfolds as a whole. I'll discuss some of your boldest predictions as well for this group of Boilermakers. You guys were awesome on Twitter this week. Sent some great stuff my way, so we have a lot to talk about from you all. We're finally here, guys. It is time to talk some football. If you don't already, follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. I know many of you do because you were active there, hanging out, participating with the show. Thank you to all of you who did that. And if you don't already follow us on Twitter, what are you waiting for? It's time to go to Twitter and follow us at Boilers Beyond. And if you don't already, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Football season goes by quick, takes us right into basketball season. It's all gas, no brakes here. We'll be coming to you every week. So make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. All right, 10 bold predictions. Here we go. We'll see how these go at the end of the year. If I hit a few of these, that's probably an all right success rate. Number 1, Aiden O'Connell will become the first Purdue quarterback to pass for more than 4,000 yards in a season. Curtis Painter currently has the record. He was just 15 yards shy of 4,000 back in 2007. But my caveat with this is that O'Connell will do it in just 12 regular season games. From back to 2007, Curtis Painter did that in 13 after throwing for over 500 yards in the Motor City Bowl that year. So I'm going to go and say O'Connell throws for 4,000 yards in the regular season. If you do the math, that's well over 300 yards per game, pushing 350 yards per game. I think he can do it. I think there's going to be a number of games where he's going to have to do it for Purdue to have a chance to win. We saw last year throwing for over 500 yards against Michigan State. I believe he threw for over 500 yards against Tennessee, or pretty close to it maybe. I don't remember that one for sure, but he threw the ball a lot last year. He's going to have to do it again this year for Purdue to have the type of season they want to, and he will break the record for single-season pass yards by a Boilermaker. Number 2, for the first time since 2018, Purdue will rush for more than 100 yards per game, but barely. I'm going to predict exactly 104 yards per game on the ground. We've talked about the running back stable that Purdue has this year. King Daru is going to be your number 1 guy again, but I'm recording this Wednesday evening. I just got done listening to the Jeff Brohm radio show, and while he doesn't come out and say it, Brohm is a very reserved guy, doesn't like to say more than he has to. I don't wonder if Dylan Downing gets the number 2 carries at running back over Kobe Lewis, the Central Michigan transfer, to start the season at least. I've listened to the interviews from Jeff Brohm after practice, and he's mentioned Kobe Lewis being a little bit slower to acclimate to the offense, and he's also just a little bit slower to acclimate to football again after sitting out the entire 2021 season. Based off of some of the comments Jeff Brohm made tonight, talking about Dylan Downing's improvement. I know he's wanted to slim down a little bit and become a little bit more explosive and a better runner, whereas he was used a little bit more in an H-back role last year. I think Purdue's going to have 3 guys they're comfortable playing at running back, and you never know what's going to happen with Tyrone Tracy as well. I think we see just enough from Purdue's run game to get them over that elusive 100-yard-per-game mark, and they do what they haven't done each of the last 3 seasons and average triple digits on the ground. And I'll even say I think that gets off to a decent start against Penn State. I don't know that I'm predicting Purdue to rush for 100 yards in that game. That would be a pretty good accomplishment compared to what Purdue has done in some recent years against higher-level opponents. But I think you're just going to see an improved ground game also as a result of a little bit more cohesive of an offensive line. Number 3, Payne Durham finishes the season as the first team All-Big Ten tight end after leading Purdue in both receptions and receiving touchdowns. Now, it's not all that often that a tight end is the leading guy on a team in receptions. Unless you're Iowa or Wisconsin, that is a rarity. I say that because I think they both had their tight ends lead them in receptions a year ago. But I think this is something that's on the table for Purdue. You know, Payne Durham is by far your most proven pass catcher that is back from last season. He had a really good year. He's had a nice little career progression from playing just a little bit in 2019. Bryson Hopkins ahead of him on the depth chart, of course. And then 2020, Durham saw an increased role. He was the guy. Weird season in general. With only 6 games, it was hard to know too much. And then last year, full season as the guy at tight end. Missed a game or two due to injury. I think this year, keeping him healthy is incredibly important because of a lack of depth at tight end. But also that rapport he has with Aiden O'Connell is very strong. You can tell they're pretty close. They get along well. They know each other well, have been playing together for a long time now. I think he's going to be Purdue's go-to guy when they need to move the chains at times. And I also think in the red zone, when Purdue really needs a bigger body to go make plays, I think Payne Durham is going to be a guy that they look at quite a bit. So I think he's going to lead Purdue both in total receptions and receiving touchdowns on the season. Number 4, a Purdue receiver finds their way into at least honorable mention All Big Ten recognition. Maybe this isn't the boldest take out there. In fact, it probably isn't. But I don't know that there is a guy who you look at right now and put into that conversation. If you're into the preview magazines like I am, you look at some of those preseason All Big Ten teams, and I think Athlon goes out to 3rd team now, and I think Phil Steele goes all the way out to 4th team. And with the exception of Athlon being published before Milton Wright was deemed academically ineligible, there weren't Purdue receivers listed in those preseason all-conference teams. There are certainly high-level receivers in the Big Ten. You look at Jackson Smith and Jigba at Ohio State. You look at Ronnie Bell at Michigan. A number of guys. Michigan State's guys, very good. Chris Ottman-Bell at Minnesota. There's plenty of them, but I do think a Purdue receiver will find their way into honorable mention All Big Ten conversation. Who that is, I think remains to be seen, and I think who that is goes a long way in determining how the season goes. Purdue has some very gifted receivers on its roster. Guys who were good recruits out of high school, who are athletic, who have ability, who either haven't had the opportunity to break through yet or haven't been healthy to break through. I think you look at guys like Mershawn Rice, Abdur-Rahman Yassin, Elijah Canyon, the transfer from Auburn, Deion Burks, the guy, he's going to fit great in the slot, had a big catch in the bowl game. I think you look at especially those latter two guys who have gotten very positive reviews from Brom during fall camp. But even, Rice and Yassin, who have been around a few years, but just haven't been able to stay healthy. I think those are the guys who, if they can step up and really have that type of a breakout season, I think that elevates the ceiling for this team. To have a receiver with that much ability step up and become the guy, man, I think that would be awesome. And that's not to slight guys like Charlie Jones, like Brock Thompson, like Tyrone Tracy, like TJ Sheffield. And I would probably put TJ Sheffield more in that other category of guys to break out rather than with the seniors. But I just think some of those guys with very high-end athletic ability, very high-end potential, I think if those guys break out, that would be really good for this team. Even if they don't, I think a guy like a Charlie Jones or a Tyrone Tracy or a Brock Thompson, if he's healthy and 100%, there's certainly enough volume in a Jeff Brom offense to make your way into all-conference discussion, to make your way, onto those lists as a conference receiving leader. But I think if one of those younger guys can step up and make an impact early and often, that was really good for this year's Purdue team. Number 5, going over to the defensive side of the ball now, Nick Carraway breaks onto the scene with 4 sacks as a true freshman. Now, for reference, I think Kydron Jenkins led Purdue with either 5 or 5.5 sacks last year. George Karlaftis had 4.5 or 5. So this would be a pretty significant freshman year if Carraway can do that. And in this, I'm going to predict that Carraway is the only freshman to burn his red shirt this year. That everyone else from the 2022 class will play in 4 games or fewer, therefore maintaining their red shirt. Look, Carraway's been someone we've talked about on the podcast a lot. His rise at the Army All-American Bowl last year was really impressive. He was getting some really good reviews from the recruiting services that were there, people in the know, people who live and breathe recruiting were very high on him. And I think now we've even heard some of that out of practice. Jeff Brom has mentioned that Carraway is really putting himself in a position to see the field. I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think he just oozes with potential and has upside that Purdue hasn't seen, certainly in an edge rusher since George Karlaftis, but just hasn't seen in a while. I'm really excited to see what he can do. And I think he's going to, especially later in the season, separate in what is a really, really crowded room of edge rushers playing that Leo role, maybe a defensive end role a little bit. I think Carraway is going to have a massive year. And if there was an all Big Ten freshman team, which there's not, he would most certainly be on it, if you ask me. Number 6, going back to the secondary here, senior Cam Allen picks off at least 3 passes, and that will put him in double-digit career interceptions. Guy has been rock solid for Purdue. He was pressed into action really early back in 2019 as a true freshman. You'll remember that season was just a mess of injuries for Purdue, and he was playing a lot late in that season. Got off to a good start. He had a few picks last season, had one at Iowa, had one at Nebraska, had one in the opener against Oregon State. I think he's going to keep making plays back there this year. He is the most experienced guy in the secondary, and I think he's going to go utilize those ball hawking skills. He picks off a few passes, gets over 10 for his career, and really wraps up what will be a very strong career for a safety at Purdue. Number 7, with the defense as a whole, I think multiple guys from this defense earn all-conference honors. The easy one to look at is Jalen Graham. You all know how I feel about him. I think he might even be Purdue's best player overall. I think he is by far the most important player on the defense. He is certainly the best NFL prospect on this team. Very athletic, can do a ton in the defense. I think he'll be all over the field this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the backfield, making the quarterback sweat a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see him back there in the run game, defending passes. He's someone who just could be all over doing a number of things. I think there are other guys certainly capable. Cam Allen for one. If Corey Trice can stay healthy, his pure frame and athletic ability has always intrigued me. Branson Dean, Lawrence Johnson, guys who have played a lot of football up front. There are a number of guys who I think could be in that conversation. I think Purdue gets it done. I think this defense could be pretty good. And I think 2 guys get on all conference teams this year. Number 8, switching the tone a little bit. I think Purdue's going to deal with some more inconsistency on special teams this year. And I think it's going to factor heavily into at least 1 loss. Now, I'm not narrowing down a specific area. Kicking was a good area for Purdue last year. Mitch Finneran certainly had a downstretch there in early October, but rebounded to finish the season strong. It was interesting listening to Jeff Brom talk tonight because there was more talk about special teams than normal. He was very high on Finneran, even referenced that Finneran made a 57-yard field goal in Wednesday's practice, so that's good. We've talked here about what his range could be and how increasing that range is going to be important for Purdue. He only attempted 1 kick outside of 40 yards a year ago. Now, how well does he maintain that? Can he put together another 24 for 29 season? Maybe. That's a lot to ask. On the punting side of things, Jeff Brom did not sound so confident. Of course, he brought up Jack Ansell, the scholarship punter from Australia who was up and down as a true freshman. And he'll get the first crack at it this year, but Jeff Brom was not afraid to point out that Brendan Cropsey is still on the roster and that it wouldn't surprise Jeff Brom if Brendan Cropsey makes some punts at sometimes this year. I don't know that you necessarily want to hear that. I don't think that's ideal by any means. I think you would like Ansell to be in a position right now where you're not really thinking about the other guys at punter. I don't know. That didn't rub me the right way necessarily. And in the return game, you have to be excited about what Charlie Jones brings. Now, there's reason to question, is he going to have the same level of blocking on his returns at Purdue that he had at Iowa? If there's one thing about Iowa, they can block. I don't know if he'll have that at Purdue. I don't think either, though, you need him to do as much, especially in the punt return game. Those get dangerous sometimes. And when you have a good quarterback that you have trust in, and if you're moving the ball well, sometimes it's okay to just fair catch the ball and take your medicine and start with the ball wherever it lands. Sometimes you don't need to get too aggressive and risk a turnover that changes the game. So I don't know that I view this special teams unit as bad, but I don't know that I view it as great either. I think there's going to be some inconsistency, and I do think there's going to be at one point this year where either it's field goals, it's punting, it's a mistake in the return game. The special teams factors heavily into a Purdue loss. More optimistically here at number 9, Purdue cracks the AP Top 25 for the second consecutive season, and for the first time in program history, appears in a college football playoff top 25 ranking show. Look, I think it's fair. Now, I am of the opinion that if Purdue beats Penn State in week 1, this first part of this might be done by week 2. Purdue could be ranked after winning week 1 if they can get it done against Penn State. I know Purdue's sitting in the 30s right now, if you really break down those rankings and where others receiving votes are. But we know what that Thursday night game can mean. Just ask Kenny Hill, the old Texas A&M quarterback who became an overnight Heisman sensation after one game on a Thursday night. Those standalone games in week 1, think back to when Texas beat Notre Dame, and everyone said Texas was back, and neither of those teams even made a bowl game that season. What you do in week 1 can really sway perception, especially when you have this, a slate to yourself. So I think Purdue could get that done early if they can win, and if not, a favorable schedule in late November could allow them to kind of stack wins a little bit and slide in there at the end. So I think Purdue has a number next to their name at some point this season, and I think that late November slate will help Purdue get into that top 25, college football playoff poll towards the end of the season. Number 10, last one, Purdue exits 2022 with another bowl win, and this is just a hunch. I don't like predicting bowl outcomes early on, but just a little hunch I have. And they feel like good quarterback play in 2023 will be enough to get them back to another bowl game. Again, I don't like making bowl predictions when you don't know who you're playing. I'll talk about this here in a little bit, but I think Purdue is in a spot where they're in good shape. They have a lot of seniors who will be contributing this year. I think that bodes well in a bowl game, especially, if it's not a New Year's Six bowl of some type where you may see a number of opt-outs from the other team. I don't know that I envision that from Purdue, so I think that'll help them. And looking ahead to 2023, I think there will be some optimism after this season that quarterback play can help them put together another bowl season in 2023. A bonus one here, and this is unrelated to Purdue on the field, but a bonus one, Louisville has a strong season down there. I have their over 6 wins for the season. Malik Cunningham's a very fun quarterback to watch. They're going to have a good season. They're going to be at least 7-5. Scott Satterfield is recruiting well down there. That'll be enough to get Scott Satterfield a contract extension, and we will exhaust the Jeff Brom to Louisville rumors for at least another year or two. So there you go. 10 predictions of mine with a bonus. For the record, Purdue's record this season, we've talked about that over-under at 7.5, where I think it's a pretty good number. I think if you break it down from a standpoint of how many close games Purdue is going to play in this year, I think that makes 7-5 and 8-4 probably the two most likely outcomes. The schedule isn't murderer's row. You don't play Ohio State or Michigan. That's great. That's the best you could ask for. I think getting Penn State earlier is probably a good thing, just because you're still fully healthy and have some depth. There aren't that many games that you look at and say, boy, I don't know, Purdue can win that one. In fact, if there is one, it's probably that game at Wisconsin, and I don't know if there's another one you look at and feel that way. But there aren't that many games that you look at and say, boy, I just don't see how Purdue loses that. A lot of these games, Purdue will be between a touchdown favorite and a touchdown underdog. It's going to come down to playing well in close games. It's the old Phil Steele special, if you read that magazine at all. How do they do in one-score games? That's going to be important for Purdue. And how well do they do those little things, like moving the chains on third and short, like getting stops when they need to, like converting in the red zone, like not making special teams errors. Those are going to be what Purdue relies on this season. I am going to pick Purdue to go 8-4. Now, I say that. Please don't go to the window and put your kid's college fund on over 7.5 wins. I don't recommend that. I think that's a really good number. I think this season is going to come down to the month of October. I think Purdue loses once in September. I think Penn State and Syracuse are two games that you could lose. You'll be dogs against Penn State. You'll be favored at Syracuse, probably by a field goal to a touchdown. But that October slate, at Minnesota, at Maryland, home versus Nebraska, and then at Wisconsin. By the end of that, you'll played 8 straight weeks. To go 8-4, I think Purdue has to win at least 2 of those games. On the flip side, I think if you beat Penn State, you feel really good about going over that 7.5 mark. It's easier said than done, without a doubt. We'll have a full breakdown and prediction of the season opener for you next week against Penn State, but I'm going to go 8-4. Look, it's the Big Ten West. It's competitive. It gets ugly. It gets physical. You get some bad weather late in the season that Purdue's going to have to hope to avoid, but I think 8 wins is pretty realistic. I think 7 wins is pretty likely, and certainly the other extremes are both possible. But I think 7 to 8 wins is most likely, and we're going to go with 8-4 and err on the side of optimism. In the Big Ten West, I think 8-4 will be good enough to tie for third with Iowa. I have Wisconsin at 1. I have Minnesota just ahead of Purdue. I have Purdue tying with Iowa, third place in the West. I predict that because Iowa gets both Michigan and Ohio State in the crossover. That's brutal. I feel bad for them for that. I think Minnesota's pretty good. Wisconsin gets my pick until they prove me wrong, which I guess 2 years in a row of not winning the West. Maybe they have proven me wrong, but I think that's going to be a really interesting race up at the top of the West because no one's going to run away with it. That's for sure. I think those 4 teams all have a shot at winning it. I think Illinois and Nebraska are going to tie for 5th place in the division, and that Scott Frost will depart from Lincoln after a 6-6 season. And then the Cats, Coach Fitzgerald's Cats, are going to bring up the rear of the West. And if you listen to this after Saturday, maybe I'll already look like a fool. Maybe they've already beaten Nebraska. Who knows? But that's where I'm going to go. And then Ohio State dominates Wisconsin and Indianapolis as the Buckeyes start 14-0 before they lose to Alabama in the college football playoff championship game. So there's my Big Ten for you. As I said in the start, had some awesome participation from some of you guys on Twitter. We had a lot of fun with this. I sent out some polls, got some feedback before I ultimately asked you all for your hot takes, your boldest predictions about this season. Let's go through these polls first, and then we'll open it up to you all. I asked how many games Purdue wins this fall, and the mistake I made was that I didn't include regular season only in the tweet. When you pick your record, it's like the win totals out in Vegas. It's only for the regular season. You can't predict a win or a loss when you don't know where, when, or who you're going to play against. I know I broke that rule in our bold predictions, but that's why it's bold, right? 44% of you more optimistic than me, saying that Purdue's going to win 9 or more games this season. That would be remarkable. That would be absolutely incredible. That would be, tying for the all-time record of regular season wins in Purdue history. 39% of you are right there with me at 8 wins. So over 80% of you guys have 8 or more. Again, that's fantastic. 13% have the Boilers at 7-5, with just 4% at 6-6. You know, look, it's awesome to see people this excited and this optimistic about it. I remember growing up, really in the majority of the Danny Hope and then in high school for the Daryl Hazel eras, and there was no excitement around the program. From 2019 to 2016, there just wasn't, 2009 to 2016, there just wasn't much excitement. Now, it's really cool to see people excited and fired up. Sure, it's maybe drinking the Kool-Aid or looking at things through black and gold lenses, but I do love the optimism. It's fun to see. I asked what position you are most confident in outside of quarterback, and we had some split distribution here. 38% went to defensive line, 27% went receiver, with 23% going secondary and 12% going special teams. I don't know that I have a great answer either. I really don't. It's tough. It really is, because there is some good depth at receiver and at the defensive line. I do think that secondary has some nice top-end talent. And special teams, I don't know. I'm not as sold there, but I had to include a fourth option. So some nice even distribution there. I don't know that I have a great answer either. I asked about the biggest concern ahead of this season, and half of you said it's going to be replacing David Bell and George Karlaftis. I'm right there with you. I think that really is the biggest concern heading into this year. Those guys were legitimate all-conference, borderline all-American maybe talents that trying to replace is not easy to do. Those guys don't just grow on trees. I think that's going to be big. 31% of you said higher expectations, and I think this is just as valid. Last year was great. Purdue went 8-4. That was the first time Purdue had won more than 6 games in the regular season since 2007. The first time they'd won 8 games in the regular season, 2006, I believe, and that was when they played 13 regular season games. So it's been a while. But part of what made that so much fun was that Purdue's over-under was 5. There weren't high expectations coming in. So this year, with higher expectations, I think it's absolutely valid to be a little bit skittish about those. 9% said the coaching staff turnover. Maybe we haven't done a good enough job on the podcast this summer of talking about some of that, because Purdue did replace 5 assistant coaches after last season. So certainly something there. And then had a couple of write-in responses, just staying healthy, overall depth. I think those are both very fair concerns, especially health. I mean, Purdue can't afford to lose Aiden O'Connell, that's for sure. Where does Purdue finish in the West? I gave my prediction. They tie for third. 64% of you said second or third, with another quarter saying first place, that they're going to Indianapolis. 11% at fourth or fifth. And it looks like we had a vote or two from Indiana fans down south that selected Purdue finishing in 6th or 7th. So very optimistic. That is the end of the story here. And as we go into some of your bold predictions that you tweeted to me, that theme certainly stays true. We had a lot of successful record predictions tweeted in. 3 of you said Purdue goes 11-1 this year. I don't know that I can go that far. I think the schedule's a little bit too daunting for that. There are a few 10-2s out there. Hey, it'd be incredible. Purdue's never won 10 regular season games before. They've only won 10 games in a season once. That was back in 79 with a bowl game win. So, heck yeah, that would be fantastic. It'd be awesome. I love the bold predictions there. We had Sam, longtime listener of the show. He tweeted in a few good ones. He said the run game won't be dead last in the Big Ten. That might be just as bold as saying 10-2. Kidding, obviously, but a very bold one there. Abdur-Rahman Yassin emerges as the wide receiver 1. We had a few guys tweet in about Yassin, so some optimism there about him. And as I said earlier, if he breaks out, I think that elevates this team's ceiling. And Corey Trice having 5 interceptions, that's a lot of picks, but he certainly has the frame for it. We saw him pick off 2 in a game back as a redshirt freshman in 2019. So he has the ability. He has the frame. I like that. The one that got the most likes in the replies came from Mackie Maniacs, another good account that's been active on Twitter with the show for a long time. They're saying Purdue finally returns a kick or punt for a touchdown. They haven't done it since 2013. Akeem Hunt to open up the game against Indiana State, where Darrell Hazel so memorably beat Indiana State 20-14. They opened that one up with a kickoff return touchdown, and they haven't done it since. So they're saying that Purdue will do it this year. We had one from Dan saying Cam Allen gets ejected from a game for targeting. Yeah, sure, it's been a while since Purdue's had a player ejected for targeting. Knock on wood real quick there. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but certainly could. A couple of ones here that I thought were really interesting because they go down some winding roads a little bit. We had the Boiler in Texas said Purdue beats Penn State, but they still finish 8-4. That's certainly possible. Absolutely is. They go to Syracuse. That October stretch is rough. At some point, Iowa has to show that they can beat Purdue. Illinois is going to be improved, I think. It absolutely could happen. That's a good prediction. I think that's very realistic. Mike said that Purdue beats both Wisconsin and Minnesota. Those are both on the road, but they lose at home to Iowa. I think you make that trade-off in a heartbeat. If you can get that Wisconsin monkey off your back this year and you can go take down Minnesota for the first time since 2017, absolutely. I think you make that trade-off in a heartbeat. We had one that said O'Connell throws for 35 touchdown passes. I think that can happen. I don't think that's crazy. That's a lot of touchdown passes, but if he's healthy for all 12 and Purdue puts together a nice season, I bet that can happen. Now, we did have a Heisman prediction in there. If you listened over the summer, you know how I feel about that one. Don't agree there. Don't think that's a fair prediction to make, but hey, anything can happen. They have to play the games for a reason. And if you want bold, here is maybe the boldest prediction I've ever seen. This is bolder than saying that Purdue goes 15-0 and wins the college football playoff. So Brad tweeted in, Aiden O'Connell gets hurt. Purdue struggles all year. They lose a bunch of road games, and they finish 4-8. So not a good season for the Boilers, according to Brad. Then Jeff Brom leaves for Louisville, takes the head coaching job at his alma mater, which paves the road for Drew Brees to return to the promised land, his alma mater, and guide Purdue to the college football playoff 4 years later with Brady Allen winning the Heisman Trophy. There you go, Brad. That is as bold as I have ever heard. I appreciate you tweeting that in because that is, there's a lot of twists and turns on there. There's a lot to that one. I love how far out of left field that is, but if that ends up coming true, Brad, in 2026, make sure you DM the show. There will be a number of beers on me for that crazy foresight if you can get that one to come true, because that would be unreal. Thank you to all of you guys who tweeted some stuff in. That was super fun. Next week, it's game week, what we've all waited for. Purdue versus Penn State, It feels like we've all been waiting for this game ever since the stands were cleared at Nissan Stadium back in December. It'll be up on Tuesday morning, I think. We will record it Monday night. Get it up for you Tuesday morning so that you have plenty of time to get that in before kickoff, whether it's while you're hanging out at work or in class earlier in the week, or while you are making that drive back to West Lafayette for the season opener. You'll have plenty of time to listen to it. We finally made it, guys. College football is here. There are games this weekend. 2 games that are Big Ten related. 4 of Purdue's 12 opponents play this weekend. So if you're into getting a little scouting in, go ahead and get some of that done. It's been a long wait. It's been a long summer. I've been ready to jump out of my couch waiting for this ever since the Indy 500 ended. Soak it all in. Football is back. That's all I have for today, however. Again, thank you so much to those of you who participated in the polls and sent in your bold predictions. Had a blast with that, and I'll be putting that in the notes for us to do again in the annual basketball preview episode as well. Thanks for spending the time with me today. Again, next week we will be back in-depth preview of the season opener, and we'll see what the Boilers need to do to pull off a bit of an upset against the Nittany Lions on national TV. Follow us on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, until next week, enjoy those Week 0 games.